Yeah, so what's up, everyone? Great to have you guys on here again for our channel. And today we have a pretty interesting topic on our hands, a topic that will allow us to reflect on a lot of things that happened in college. A lot of events at college were directed towards this, a lot of things we did were directed towards this. So, pretty interesting topic, and it'll really allow us to reflect on a lot of our emotions. And hopefully, all our reflections can provide some value to the audience, right? So the topic for today is let's talk campus placements. So I think before we get into some of the thoughts I have, I think the first brush I had with placements when I was in campus was when I woke up one day and I walk out of my room and I see 100 different people going in formals, right? So these are people you have to imagine that these are people you have never seen in formals, right? And then I asked someone passing by, like, hey, what's up? Why is everyone getting out in such a hurry in formals? And they're like, we have Goldman Sachs online test going on today. And I was like, I thought that was a coding job, right? And I did not know that so many of my friends could code, but I see all of them running over there. So I'm like, what is happening? And later in the day, I realized that a lot of people went to that online test without actually realizing what the job was even for, or without even knowing what Goldman Sachs was. So, it tells a lot, and I think it's a good incident that gave me a brush, right? It gets you into the zone. You realize that, okay, the competition is on, everyone's running behind jobs now. So, yeah, so that was sort of my first brush with placements. But, you have to admit that the first time everybody thinks about placements is before they join a college, right? So, because that's the whole purpose of going to college, is to get a job. So, when did you guys first start thinking about placements before you joined college, and what did you guys think? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the first time I thought about placements was obviously once I got an admit into this top tier institute. Then, like everyone else, I pulled up the placement records and the stats of all departments and then saw it, and I was fairly impressed. The fact that the institute boasted 95% plus placement stats across all departments was something that that I wasn't expecting, and I was fairly surprised, and I was very happy about this. But again, getting into the institute and after you actually go through the internship and placement process on campus, it gives you a totally different perspective, right? Compared to how you felt about placements before entering college. So I think we'll be talking more about that during the course of this video. So Sadi, if you have any thoughts along the same lines.
Yeah, so I think when I was planning to apply to all of these colleges and I got into NIT Trichy, for me, I had two expectations. I think it was very similar to what my parents had for me. One was making sure that I have 8 CGPA and above in college, and the second one was I need to get a good job. I think my benchmark and my parents' benchmark was that I need to get a package about 12 lakhs per annum. I think that's the kind of benchmark I was getting into. I honestly at that point did not really know how feasible that was. What was really the placement scenario? Like Achut mentioned, I just knew that most of the people get placed, and you have all of these high salary packages and everything. So I think that's why my benchmark was a little bit high. So yeah, I think that was my first expectation when I had when I came into college about placements.
Okay, so pretty far, great expectations. We're all like, okay, hey, unless we fall into a top bottom 1%, we're all good, right? So we're getting placed. So let's see how that turned out. So yeah, so the next thing I wanted to ask you guys was, the next thing we should discuss is, so what exactly does placement look like? Like, what are your thoughts on on-campus placements for top tier, especially engineering institutes in India? Akshit, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think in these top tier engineering institutes, one very, very big advantage is you can get inside the college, find your interest, and there'll be some company that comes that aligns with your interest, right? So it need not be related to engineering at all. So that is one myth that was debunked very quickly for me. When I came into college, I expected that most of the people are going to get placed in their core engineering field and go for a core job. But then once I actually started seeing how placements work, then we realized that it's placements doesn't happen according to your department, but rather what the industry demands. So if there's a lot of demand in the industry for coders, then a lot of coding profiles come and recruit irrespective of what the department the person is from. And the same thing applies for various management fields like consulting, finance, etc. And then you also have your core jobs. So I think this is what I first understood of what placements is, about what placements is, and so that was my thoughts entering campus.
Yeah, and I think to summarize like all of the different fields that are kind of there in most of the premier engineering colleges in India. So the most sought after is software and like coding related roles. I think that's primarily because of the very high like pay packages that they kind of offer. So I would say software is a very important domain. Then you have core engineering. I think whatever subject that you're doing, there'll be like some companies that will come and recruit. You have electronics, you have data analytics, you have pure like management and techno managerial roles, you have consulting. So I think broadly this would be like all of the different domains that are coming, like all the companies that are coming for placements in each of these individual domains.
Okay, yeah, interesting. Even I agree with Achit on having, and I agree with both of you in fact on there being like a multitude of profiles, because before joining I had absolutely no idea that you could explore anything other than engineering, right? And that was also one of the reasons I did not plan to sit for placements right when college started, because I thought that was the only option I had for me.
Yeah.
But that was very different once I entered.
Yeah, so but one thing very important to note is that although there are so many different profiles, the number of companies that are coming for each of these individual profiles varies. Like if you look at the number of software companies that are coming, the number is like super high, and the number of people getting placed in software is also very, very high. And if you were to compare and contrast that with the number of companies coming for core engineering, it's relatively low. And it's really funny, right? So when we first got into like engineering, we like, especially in the first year, we are very enthused about the fact that we want to get into like core engineering and stuff, and we're going to get placed there. But we kind of realize as we progress towards the 3 to 4 years in engineering that not many companies are actually coming. There are very like few companies. So I think that's an interesting point to note.
Yeah. So anyway, so now we've sort of thought about what we realized once we got into college, what we were thinking about before we got into college, and all of that. So when you apply to a company, right, for campus placements, the first thing that you submit is your resume, right, which summarizes like your whole profile, right? So profile building is probably, and yeah, it is one of the most important things when it comes to actually landing a good job. And so I just want to like pick your brains right now and sort of ask why. So how did you guys go about building your profiles, and what were your thoughts and what drove your actions? Sadi, do you have any?
Yeah.
How did you go about it?
Yeah, so for me, to be really honest, I never did like profile building for the sake of like getting placed. Like, let me just tell it right off the bat. I never had like selective domains or like companies in mind, and keeping that target in mind, I worked on all my profile doing internships and everything, right? So for me, profile building was more about getting as much experience as possible in like diverse things and getting some clarity on what kind of job or what kind of domain that I really want to get into immediately after college. And keeping this context in mind, I tried to do, and during my 4 years of undergrad, I think I did like 5 internships in total. All the 5 was in like completely different domains. I started off in core engineering. I did a data science and analytics internship. Then I did a consulting internship. I did a marketing internship. I did an operations internship. And I think that kind of clarity really helped me make a decision. And obviously, there were so many points that I could put on my profile whenever I applied to like different kinds of companies. So I could pick and choose selective experiences that I could use for like selective companies, and I could remove it. So apart from my internships, I think I was actively involved in a lot of student activities in college. Part of like fest teams, the marketing teams of fests. So I think I learned a lot of stuff over there. So I think that was something that I could add. During 3 years, I was involved in a student consulting organization called as 180 Degrees Consulting. Through that, we did a lot of student consulting projects with startups and non-profit organizations, which I could again like kind of add on my resume. And apart from my professional interests, I was also part of the music group at NIT Trichy, like the band which was there, and I've like performed like multiple times over there. So I think that was like another value add that I could probably add to say that I'm not really like a boring person who just focuses on career and everything, right? So I think that's just a quick primer on what I did for profile building.
Yeah, so I think I 100% agree with the first statement that Sadi made. Even if you go look at the way I built my profile, it was never focused towards one single company or that one dream company that I wanted to land. And everything that all my profile building is based on this one word learning. Right, so I wanted to learn as much as possible, explore as many diverse opportunities as possible, and that is what drove me to be a part of all these student activities and doing my internships and everything. And one thing to note for on-campus placements is your on-campus positions of responsibility really matter a lot, and it pays a lot on your resume, right? And that is something that people have to go ahead and do according to me. That is, be involved in a lot of student activities on campus because it's very specific to that campus. And when a company comes and recruits, you can talk about it a lot compared to you applying off campus and talking about it over there. So that is one thing that I understood right at the beginning, and I was involved in around 7 to 8 clubs and teams in my campus, and this was across diverse domains, right? With related to marketing, related to entrepreneurship, related to student consulting, and then I was also part of the football team. So this kind of weighed a lot. This kind of gave me a lot to talk about during my interviews and gave me a fairly good resume to present and help me stand out of the crowd.
Yeah, so one important point to note over here is that, yes, we do understand there are a lot of points that you need to add to your resume, but with everything that we kind of did in college, there were two things that we kind of optimized for. One was, what was the learning outcome out of that? Like, what kind of skills did we get? What kind of unique experience did we get? Be it internships or being part of student activities in college. And I think the other one important point that we kind of optimized for is the network that we built, right? Be it seniors or industry folks. And I think that everyone should kind of think about profile building in this way. Like, the profile building term itself shouldn't actually be used, but whenever you're trying to think about your resume and what you really need to do, I feel that people need to optimize for these two particular points rather than just putting points in there.
I think a good way to think about profile building is how do you grow as a person, right? That should be kind of the underlying thing behind profile building. It should not be about adding a lot of points to your resume, right? That should never be the driving factor for profile building. Automatically, as you grow as a person and you learn a lot more, you'll obviously have a lot to talk about during our interviews and to put on your resume. So
exactly.
That is probably the way that all three of us have thought about profile building, and that's a very good way to think about it because it works.
Yeah. Vijay, you were saying?
Yeah, so I think, I don't think a lot of people actually realize that. I think you both put it very well. So, I think the more skills you learn, I think people don't realize the fact that skills are transferable, right? So every experience makes you learn something, and that can actually be used in a lot of other places in life. So
exactly.
When you build a lot of skills, you have the luxury to use those skills to land a lot of other different types of opportunities. So that's something a lot of people don't realize. But there is one point that we actually did not cover in profile, which was academics. And I think there are people on both sides here. There are people who say only skills matter, academics don't matter. And then on the other side, there are people who are like only academics matter, nothing else matters. So I think that is one point that needs to be addressed when it comes to profile building. So what do you guys think about how academics matter for jobs?
So with respect to this particular point, I'm like a very realist, okay? So the way you need to think about anything with respect to your profile is whether it opens or closes doors for you in your life, be it the next 10 years, 15 years, 40 years, or the next 1 year also. You having a high CGPA definitely opens doors. Like, that's something that you cannot deny, whatever happens. And I've seen that in so many instances where people get rejected just because, they have like a low CGPA, right? And the same thing kind of applies also for your profile and other aspects of it, like your positions of responsibilities and the internships that you do. You having that experience, does it open doors for you in the future or does it close doors? It obviously opens doors. So everyone needs to think about their profile very holistically. You cannot really neglect one part of your profile and say that I will leave this completely and compensate it with something else. Unless you're exceptional in something. Let's say you're representing the country in some Olympics or something like that. I think that point it kind of makes sense. Like you cannot obviously concentrate on something. But I'm pretty sure that the majority of people looking at this video are not like that exceptional or something. So you kind of need to look into your profile very holistically. And obviously a lot of people will be thinking right now, what is a good CGPA? And I think that kind of varies from college to college. If you're from like a premier institution in India, for that matter, anything above 8 or 8.5 is considered to be like a really good CGPA, and it will never like close doors for you in the future. But the lower that you go with respect to your colleges, I think the higher the CGPA that you kind of need to have. So I think that would be like my thoughts on academics.
Yeah, I think Sadi put it really well, right? That think about any part of your profile, whether it opens doors or closed doors. And speaking in the context of on-campus placements, I mean, literally every single company that comes has a CGPA criteria, right? There's probably maybe 10% of the companies don't really look for a CGPA criteria, but everyone has some benchmark. So, I mean, in the context of on-campus placements, CGPA is definitely important, academics is definitely important, and you need to have a decent CGPA to get you across that first line. And then maybe in the interviews or during the online test, people don't really talk about your CGPA much, but you need that minimum CGPA to cross that first barrier to enter, to put your right foot on the door, inside the door. Right?
Yeah. So I think one thing that I want to make it very clear is that with respect to on-campus placements, at least in most of the premier institutes, you are pretty much safe. You're in a very good position if you have like a CGPA above 8. Like that doesn't mean that if you have below 8, you cannot like get placed or something. Like there are so many companies who have like shortlists who are above 6 or above 7 also. But the way that you need to think about it is basically what puts you in a good position, what opens doors like 100% for you in like most of the cases. I think that's how people should start thinking about any decisions they're taking with respect to their profile.
Yeah, so I think we are in a logical flow here. I think we first talked about what are the types of opportunities that are available and all of that. Then we talked about actually building our profiles, right? So, when the placement season sort of rolls in, first we have to sort of decide, from all these opportunities and given our profile, what kind of jobs can we actually target? What kind of companies can we actually target? So how did you guys actually decide what you wanted to target? Achyut, how did you do it?
Yeah, so I think this taking us back to the point that we discussed about profile building. When I was building my profile, I was constantly learning, exploring a lot of different domains, and then I was identifying where my interests lie, right? And then I think at the end of my first year itself, I decided that core engineering is not something that I'm very passionate about, and rather general aptitude, problem solving, and communication, talking to a lot of people. This is what I'm interested in. And as I kept exploring, I found a lot of domains inside management kind of appealed to me. So then I went ahead, talked to a lot of seniors to ask about what are the kind of management companies that come to campus. And then I realized that most of the companies that come are very analytics based, right? And they require a few technical skills as well. And that is how I kind of made it my goal to get one of these analytics companies. And this was at the beginning of my second year, I think. So I made the goal to get one of these analytics companies, and that's why I started doing a lot of online courses, learning the technical skills required for it, and then I was like hell-bent on getting one of these management/analytics companies. That's why I went about deciding which companies to apply for.
Yeah. So if I were to set the context right for on-campus placements, like Vijay mentioned at the beginning, that he saw so many people applying and going for the Goldman Sachs interview, right? If you were to look at why that's happening and what are the factors that people are usually using to consider whether to apply to a company or not, I think right now majority or most of the people, it's driven just by the money factor and what the package that the companies are giving. But I think people need to start thinking about their career like a little bit holistically. There are so many other things apart from just money, right? So for me, considering the fact that money is a parameter, let's keep that. You should not like ignore it completely. Everyone is coming from different economic backgrounds and environments, so you can't ignore that. It's very important. So money is one thing, obviously. The other thing that I kind of considered is what domains kind of interest me. I think that's very similar to what Achyut just mentioned. Like, what am I generally interested in? Where do I really want? Where I'll be okay with working for, I don't know, 12, 15 hours a day. Like, that's something that's very important, right? So I think that's the next question that I kind of had in my mind. The third parameter was I was looking at areas where there was be very, very steep learning curves. Because the first job that you immediately get out of college, it's not like the most important thing in the world, but if you get like a really good job where you can learn like as much as you can, it really gives you a boost with respect to your career, which you can leverage and transfer the skills to like other industries and probably like climb the corporate ladder. So I would say that's the third and the most important thing. The fourth parameter that I kind of used to like decide between different companies was the people part of all of these organizations and the kind of culture that's there. Not many people actually think about this as a very important thing, but people genuinely need to understand that your experience working in a company is pretty much dependent on your manager and the senior level folks in the organization. Like whatever happens, right, your whole experience and your decision to leave a job or continue a job is heavily dependent on that particular point. And so that's the reason why people need to do some kind of research about what the culture is, what kind of people are working, and what kind of experience or background do they have, and take decisions based on that. So I feel that I've just listed down probably like 4 or 5 parameters. In an ideal scenario, people need to think of more such parameters that are very specific to them and specific to their career paths. And again, going back to the previous point, whether it opens doors or closes doors for them. Don't try to like specialize in the beginning of your career itself, right? So I think those are the kind of parameters that I kind of use to make a decision as to whether I should apply to like a particular company or not.
Yeah, I think, Sadi said an interesting point, but I don't know, while all the points are relevant and in an ideal scenario, all of those should be considered, I do think that, when it comes to on-campus placements, your options are definitely limited.
Yes.
But I think the key
That's
is
true.
to try and match as many of these as possible to the companies that are available to you on the campus, right?
That's true. Yeah, so I think one important point that people should kind of think about is that you need to prioritize between all of these different parameters. It is not possible for every company out there to fit all of these individual parameters. So you just need to use that as like, a way for you to just make a decision, something like one guiding light, like a North Star kind of a thing that you need to use. So it's just that people should start thinking about all of these parameters.
And just one small word of caution, right? So people watching this video, if you apply all the parameters that you want to, and let's say out of the 250, 300 companies that visits campus, let's say 2 companies fit those 6-7 parameters that you come up with, then it doesn't mean you limit yourself to just applying to those 2 companies, right? Because you've set your targets on these 2 companies, work towards it, but at the end of the day, let's say you don't get it, then now you're in a very bad position because you don't know which companies to apply for and you haven't built your profile according to that. So I think, as Sadi keeps mentioning this word, build your profile holistically, keep in mind the bigger picture, optimize for both, have a plan A, have a plan B, have a plan C, and I think that should get you through the door.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting point. I think I myself have seen people who have if you have too many criteria, that's going to be a huge problem as well, right? So sometimes you have to, be tolerant and also realize that there's nothing called a perfect company, there's nothing called a perfect life even, but there's nothing called a perfect company. So, and everything adds to your experience. So just like you explore with your profile, you also can explore with your career as well. So yeah, but moving on. So the next thing that comes to placements is once you actually shortlist your companies and you decide what you want to sit for. I think the next thing, I think most companies, the first thing that you do is write an online test, right? So there's always an online test. It can be technical, it can be non-technical, anything like that. And online tests can actually be quite eventful. There have been several stories and events of, very unique, just like the Goldman Sachs one I mentioned, where everybody went and they got completely surprised that it's a software or a coding test, right? So there are online tests can be very eventful. They can cause a lot of drama. So have you guys written online tests and how was your experience and how did you prepare for it?
Yeah, so I have written like a lot of online tests. So most of them was like geared towards like management and analytics roles. So I think that's where I'll be sharing my experience from. So for those kind of roles, the preparation is more driven towards knowing basics of data analytics and practicing for aptitude, right? Aptitude kind of questions. So I think that's how you prepare for most of it. So I don't want to go into how I prepared for all of these online tests. But I think I want to talk about my experience with online tests. I've had like really, really smooth ones and ones where it has gone really terrible. So there was this one company that I was applying for that I was really looking forward to and I wanted to take it really seriously. So there's one company I was like genuinely looking forward to. So during the online test, when I filled out all of the details, registration and everything, I remember that the first 10-15 minutes the counter was just going because all of these tests are timed and I couldn't see any of the questions. And at that point, just think about like the panic mode that you get into, right? That 10-15 minutes, because your career is going to change, it's completely going to get changed because of that 10-15 minutes, some technical glitch that's there. But immediately, I think after that, I spoke to my placement rep and then he told me to contact the company and immediately did that. And they kind of like reset the counter. So I think the lesson learned over here is that even if some technical glitches or anything happens to you, just calm down and just reach out to the company and make sure they will make sure that everything gets like rectified. So just keep your calm and just focus on the next like 1 hour practicing all of that and solving all of the questions.
Okay. So talking about online tests, I haven't really given my share of online tests. I've written probably 1 or 2. But I remember for this one company, right, you were allowed to write your online test right from your hostel room. So I remember that night when like you go inside any room, everybody is sitting and writing that online test. They have their doors locked. You can I've never even seen the hostel that silent, right? Like literally everyone in the hostel is locked inside their rooms writing the test. And I remember I had my friend sitting with me, and then my room door was locked and everything. I had my friend sitting with me because just in case someone comes and knocks on the door, I don't need to like get up and open the door. My friend will do it for me. So I mean, writing an online test on campus, especially from your hostel rooms, was really an experience. Yeah.
Yeah, true. I will never forget that day because even I was part of all of this stuff that was going on in campus. Yeah, and immediately after the exam is over, you just walk out and then you'll meet some another person in the corridor and you'll be like, "How was the exam? How did it go? How did you do it? How did you solve this question?" And I think that time that company, they had a very new format also with the kind of questions that they were asking. So it was very new to like most of us. So yeah, like everyone was like super scared even after the exam. I remember.
Yeah,
that
I think it actually got worse during the pandemic too. I mean, if there's a technical glitch in the training and placement department, it's fine. It's not your fault. But if it happens in your house, you panic even more, right? So now you have to call completely unknown people. You have no placement rep to immediately talk to, and then it can be from your personal end as well. So it's just the whole thing can be uncertain. But chances are, hopefully it should go well. I think it's gone well in most cases, but there can be some cases where luck is just not going to favor you.
Yeah, and especially when things go south at home, yeah. Like the person who shares that burden is always your mom. Like as soon as like things go, I just go to my mom and I start panicking. My God, what is happening? Like yeah. So shout out to my mom.
Yeah. So after online test, usually assuming if you do clear the online test, the next round is interviews, right? And interviews are way more eventful than online tests. There's no telling. I mean, we know people who have had every kind of experience, from very good experience to absolutely terrible experiences. So how do you guys prepare for interviews? And I think interviews are also very emotional. You think a lot of things, your head is just so not stable a lot of times. So how did you guys handle all of that? Sadi, how did you do it?
Yeah. So talking about the first question, which is basically how do you prepare for most of these interviews? So a quick overview of the different kinds of questions that are asked during interviews. There are two different types. One would be technical questions and the other would be HR questions. Right? Technical questions, I really don't want to get into the details because it's very specific to different kinds of domains and profiles. So if you're getting into data analytics, your technical questions will be about data analytics theory, or they maybe ask you to write a code or maybe like solve some kind of a puzzle or a guesstimate or something. So I think that kind of varies across different profiles. When it comes to HR questions is where things get really interesting. There are different types of HR questions. Like normal, it starts off with introduce yourself. Why do you want to work in this company? Why do you want to work in this industry? What are your long-term goals? What are your strengths and weaknesses? So these are some basic HR questions. And you also have behavioral and situational questions, right? So behavioral questions are like, they'll put you in an imaginary situation where there's some kind of problem that's happening and you're supposed to they'll ask you how you would you solve that particular problem. So that's all that's what behavioral questions is about. And situational questions are about them asking you some kind of past incident where you faced some kind of problem and how did you tackle it. Like, for example, tell me an instance in the past where you've led a team successfully, or tell me an instance in the past where you faced some kind of conflict within your team and how did you solve it, right? So you'd have to go back to your previous experiences and do it, right? So I think with respect to preparing for most of these interviews, I think the first thing that I keep telling people is you need to anticipate what are the questions that are being asked. Like, you need to do your research, be it talking to seniors or doing like just simple Google search, trying to understand what's the broad theme, what the structure is, right? So I think that's the first thing that people generally need to understand. The second thing that I keep saying to people, and I kind of also applied it to myself, is that the major thing in an interview is that you need to differentiate yourself from the crowd, like what everyone else is doing. A lot of people come and ask me, Anna, how do I introduce myself? How do I structure that answer? Or how do I answer this question? What kind of blueprint should I follow? Right? That's kind of like the wrong way of looking at interviews. If everyone is kind of given a blueprint to answer all of these questions, how will companies even make decisions as to who to pick and who not to pick? So your ultimate goal in each of these interviews should be to differentiate yourself, and how you do that is where it's all about your past experiences, the kind of profile that you have, the kind of skills that you have built during your past experiences, and also basically how you communicate and everything. So you need to look at interview process holistically. It's not just enough if you have like the best skills that you'll be able to crack it, right? Always leave like a lasting impression in the interviews, mind.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, a couple of really interesting points about interviews. Actually, do you have
again,
any interview experiences and how you
I'm not
prepare
going
for
to
them?
go into the technical aspect of it, like how do you prepare for that, because that is pretty straightforward, right? Like, you know what's the syllabus of the online test, then you go read up that syllabus, practice a few questions, and then you'll be able to do it. But HR interview is what I kind of really enjoy being in, because it's very interesting. You never know what's going to come. So I think I've always enjoyed being part of those interviews. And I think I can probably think of 2 to 3 things that I always did to stand out in the interview. So the first thing is creating that first impression, right? So I remember before this one very big interview, I was watching YouTube videos on how to give a good handshake, right? Because I really wanted to differentiate myself just through that first impression. So I think creating that first impression, walking into the room, greeting the interviewer and giving that handshake itself speaks a lot about how confident you are going into the interview, and just talks a lot about your character. So that is the first thing that people have to keep in mind. Second thing is, second thing is, be very conscious about what answers you are giving, right? Because there'll be a lot of callbacks. Like, one situation they ask you at the beginning, and towards the end they ask the same situation in a different way. You should be able to answer it consistently. So be very conscious of what you're answering, and what will help is having a proper structure to all of your answers, right? You just don't pointlessly talk about something, but rather keep it in a very structured way, so you will be able to remember throughout the interview what you've answered for each question. So that is something that really helped me, structuring it and being very conscious of the words that come out of my mouth. So that is the second thing. And then the last thing would be, I think all of us have heard this term, the airport test, right? Like, if the interviewer is stuck with you in an airport, with the plane is delayed for, let's say, 6 hours, would he like to spend time with you, or would he not like to spend time with you? So this is something that interviewers really look for in a HR interview. So it's very as important as giving the proper answers. It's really important to vibe well with the interviewer. Like, just having a smile on your face, kind of having open gestures, I remember I used to make a lot of jokes, or put in some humor into all of my answers just to vibe well with the interviewer, right? And it's not.
Yeah, and just to clarify, vibe doesn't mean that you wear all these t-shirts and shirts and go. Like, you need to be like formal. Like, the meaning of vibe is a little bit different, but yeah.
Yeah, very true. So I mean, have a lot of fun in the interview. That is what I'm getting at. Like, connect very well with your interviewer, have a lot of fun, but it's very, very important to not appear pretentious or fake. right? Like you just can't be laughing throughout the interview or putting in jokes in every answer. So I mean, just it should be natural, but have a lot of fun in your interviews.
There needs to be a balance.
Yes. So I think these are the 3 points that I have for how to do well during your interview.
Yeah, a couple of interesting points there. So I think just some more points that I can add is, you always have to, I think anyone going to interview should always keep in mind that, the interviewer is actually looking to work with you as a person, right? If that person, if the interviewer is going to spend 8 hours a day for a couple of years with you, he needs to vibe well with you, and that is actually a very, very important factor, even more than your skills, right? So if you can do the job, but the person hates you, it can actually ruin your career. So yeah, that's definitely a very important point. Yeah, so after the interview, I want to talk about one topic. It can be a roller coaster, which is rejection, right? So have you guys faced rejections?
Yeah.
When you sat for placements
So I
or even
think before
internships,
rejections,
and
it's
how
important
did
to
you
talk
deal
about
with it?
how we feel or how we felt before the interviews and during the interviews, right? So I think it's important to talk about that part. Like during placements, at least. So I'm this kind of a person who's like super anxious and like super stressed out when it comes to this. Be it like speaking in a public forum or like before interviews, right? So before any event starts, I'm like very nervous about it. I'm this person who just keeps rehearsing all of my answers. I'm like super tense, and if someone comes and talks to me at that particular point, I'll be like, don't disturb me. I'm like that kind of a person. But for me, surprisingly, the moment that event starts, like I'm like a very calm person. Like during the interview, I'll be like super calm. I will not really show my nervousness. I think that's something that's like very important. During the interview, don't really lose your cool. There are so many things that the interviewer will do, like be it stress interviews or stress questions. They'll put you in a very difficult state and everything, but you should never lose your calm, right? So I think that's just like been my experience, like before and during the interviews. And yeah, so talking about like facing rejections, right? I have faced like rejections multiple times in the past, and I think that was partly because I was too dependent on like certain companies and getting placed in those companies. And so there was this company, PNG, that came down for us, and in the third year for internships, and I was like, I think our whole batch was like that at that point, where we really wanted to get in to it, and I kind of made it like through multiple steps. I went to the final round, and at the last minute, like I kind of did not make it, and I think immediately after that, for I don't know, 2 to 3 months, it was very difficult period for me, just accepting the fact that, I could not get into PNG, right? And during that process, what I did was I kept blaming the company, saying that there were so many things wrong with it. My interview happened like, I don't know, like a wrong schedule. I was not in the right state to do it. And, my interview was like very hard, and they asked me stress questions. I remember even as soon as I came out of my interview, I remember telling Achyut that my interview was very hard. They asked me difficult questions and everything. But it kind of took me 1 year to realize that the fault is not with the company, but it's with me. Like I made mistakes, right? I think that's the kind of attitude that people should also have, and it definitely takes time for them, right? Once you face rejection, it's fine. Like you will have some period where it'll be difficult for you, but after that you need to genuinely think about what actually went wrong, and basically incorporate all of those points and make sure that you don't do those mistakes again in the future. And I think that really helped me. My understanding about what I did wrong during that interview helped me in all of the interviews I did in the future.
I think I definitely have my share of rejections as well, and I think what's very important is to, as long as you're actually trying to pinpoint what exactly went wrong from your side. I mean, sure, things may have gone wrong from the company side, but there's nothing you can do about it, even if it does go wrong. So I think as long as you're trying to pinpoint what you did wrong, and you're trying to correct it, you'll be fine. And also another thing that'll get you through this is to honestly believe that, there are better opportunities out there. There's nothing called a best opportunity. There are always better opportunities for you. And I genuinely believe that everything happens for good. And life has a way of sorting itself out. So you don't have to get like beat yourself up too much, but as long as you're correcting your mistakes, I think it's fine.
I think talking to
Achyut,
both of you,
what about you?
Steve Jobs quote comes to mind during one of his speeches, right? He tells this beautiful quote, "You can only connect the dots looking backwards." I feel like that has applied to my life a lot of times, right? And this is so it's not only with respect to campus placement. So in NIT Trichy, you have all these clubs and fest teams that you have to get into, and the best part about it is you go through a very rigorous selection process, and the selection process has tasks and interviews, which kind of simulates what you might experience during an actual internship and placement process. So, I mean, when talking about all these clubs and fest teams that I auditioned for, I got rejected by a lot before I got into the few teams that I was a part of, right? And during all these times, whenever I faced rejection, like at that time I felt very sad. I used to kind of doubt myself as to whether I'm not good enough and all that. But then after a couple of years, right, when I reflect back, I was always very thankful that I got rejected at those points, because there are a lot of better opportunities for me. And I got into some of the best teams in campus only because I got rejected from some of those teams at the beginning. So I think that is something that all of us can have, that positive mindset that there's always something big coming. And you can always make peace with yourself if the rejection happens after you've put in your 100% in. Like obviously if you're not put in your 100%, you've half-heartedly done something and then you get rejected, you'll always keep regretting that what if I had put in my full effort, would I have made through? So the only thing that I would probably give you guys is do not regret anything. Like make sure you put in your 100% efforts, and even after that if you don't make it through, then kind of hope that something bigger is waiting for you.
So I think to summarize all of the points that were being told, there are two important points that we have to say, right? The first one being that don't really get emotionally attached to anything, like be it any company, being any clubs, because once you face that rejection, you will not really feel that bad. There are so many other opportunities out there. And I think the second one is that, like, it's basically what Vijay mentioned, right? So just because one thing is not happening, that doesn't mean that that's the right thing for you. There are so many other opportunities out there, so don't really regret it. So I would say that would be like the two important takeaways for anyone like watching this video, applying for like on-campus placements.
Very true.
Yeah. So now let's move to the flip side, the feeling of actually getting a job, right? So feeling of converting a company. So how did, guys, I really want to know how you guys felt when you converted your dream company. What was it like? Achut, how did you feel?
I got this internship during my third year, right? PNG that we are talking about. So I think the emotions that ran through me was, I don't know, I was just jumping inside the training and placement building, and then I was like sliding on the floor and doing all kinds of shit, because I was like really happy and relieved that I can kind of chill for the rest of my third year. And I know that that big event of that internship was coming during that summer, and I had to put in all my effort towards that. And then, you know, if everything goes well, then again I don't need to sit for placements, right? So I think the first emotion that went through me was relief that, you know, I'm out of this severely competitive world and I have something that is waiting for me 6 months down the line. So that was the first feeling, and then all of us feel happy. I celebrated with my friends, had a party in my room that night and all that.
So unlike Achut, for me, I got placed during the COVID-19 pandemic, so I was like back at home. So unfortunately, I couldn't really share that moment like with friends. Like I've heard a lot of stories of seniors telling that the moment you get placed and you go back to your hostel, like all of your friends like celebrate together. And I think even during that alma mater Netflix show, when people get placed, you see how all of their friends come together and celebrate and everything, right? So I think that kind of a thing wasn't really there for me. So I was placed at home. So I think I was like, first thing that I felt was relief, right? So for me, the fact that I don't have to like endure this for the next like 3-4 months or whatever. So that, I think that was like the feeling that I had, and I was obviously like very happy, and I shared that moment with my parents. My parents were also like, no sense of relief was, definitely there. So for me, like my viewpoint on-campus placements was that I will get a job on campus and put in full efforts for the next like 7-8 months to get like a better job off campus. So for me, it was all about having that backup option. So as soon as I have that, I can completely focus on off campus placements, right? So yeah, so if you were to genuinely ask like how I felt after getting my job like at Day, like off campus, that's like an entirely different situation where I was just like jumping around and like I was literally in tears, right? So like that emotion I'll never forget. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a great feeling. And yeah, I think relief is the first thing probably most people feel. Yeah. And then I think a few days down the line, like after you celebrate a bit, and since we were all at home, I think even I celebrated with my parents itself. And once the celebrations are done, I think, being human, I think most people go back to,
Yeah.
thinking, okay, what next? Like, what am I going to do next? I keep, yeah, so you
Correct.
feel that feeling of emptiness after the relief, and you're like, okay, then you again start worrying about, what's coming up next, what do I do after that, how is the job gonna be, what am I gonna do, if I leave that
Yeah.
job, so all of
You
that.
know,
So that's
ultimately
definitely gonna
boils down
come.
to the point
But
that humans are not never satisfied with like whatever they get. We just want to keep getting new things, which
Yeah.
again like uh, makes us like super happy, right? So that's the reason why I don't know. It's a very spiritual thing, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, it doesn't have to stop any of the viewers from, enjoying for a bit. Definitely once
Yeah,
you do get a job, but yeah, it's coming.
yeah,
We know it's coming.
So, guys, but one more thing that I did, Sari did, and Vijay did, like once we got placed, right? Like it's very important to feel grateful for it and kind of help all your friends and everybody else also go through that process. Because one thing that I've always noticed is I have a lot of friends who are very anxious about not getting placed, but they just don't talk about it, and then once you go and ask them, they really, they ask us to take mock interviews or they ask us help with how did you prepare and everything. So I think one thing that you guys can do to give back, everyone who's watching, is once you get that job that you've always wanted, feel grateful for it and go ahead and help others as well. I think that is something that motivated us to start this channel also, right? Because we feel that we've got a lot of experience over the past 4 years in college, and then we really wanted to give back to people in a scalable format. So that is quite important.
yeah. I think that's a wonderful point. Like all the three of us, I'm pretty sure, right? Like we spend so much time talking to our batchmates, our juniors, helping them out, getting placed and getting the internships that they
Yes.
want, right? So that's true. Everyone needs to like keep giving all of this yarn to everyone else. Yeah, and make sure that you give the right information. Don't give wrong
Right.
advice. That's an important point. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think to summarize, I think once you are placed, definitely celebrate. But I think it's more important to feel grateful, thank everyone who helped you along the way, and thank your friends as well. And on top of that, paying it forward, right? So you try to pay it forward to as many people as you can. It's a very important point. Yeah. So I think there's another point that a lot of people actually talk about. It's controversial as well, which is how important is luck in getting a job. Okay. So I think I've personally seen luck at play a lot of times during placements. And what about you guys? Have you guys seen instances where people got lucky, or maybe you guys got
Yeah.
lucky yourselves? Achyut,
So,
have you seen any
yeah.
such situations?
Sorry, you guys. Oh,
Go ahead,
okay.
Achyut.
Yeah, so I think I can talk from my own personal experience. So I remember my PNG internship, the second interview, right? So I was called to the training and place. Like I slept very late that day, had an interview early in the morning. So I was kind of feeling a little drowsy, and then I felt, what if my second interview is there kind of immediately, then I might go in with kind of a drowsy attitude and might not go well. But I kept waiting. It looked like my interview is never going to happen. So I took a 2-hour nap sitting at the TNP building, and it was about 6:30 in the night when I woke up. There's literally nobody, right? And then I saw a couple of interviews were going, and I was scheduled to be the last person. So I think that if I hadn't got that 2-hour nap in that TNP building, probably my second interview wouldn't have gone well. So I was able to get up, go get refreshed, come back, and I was able to do very well in my interview. So and one more advantage of having my interview right at the end was there's no time limit for the interviewer. So the interviewer himself was really very relaxed, knowing that this is the last interview for the day, and he was very chill about it. We had quite a long interview. It went on for 1.5 hours, and I was just talking about a lot of personal stuff. So in that way, I feel you can call it luck, you can call it coincidence, but I think that is something that is really important.
So I think my answer is like very specific to our college. So I would say that there's a lot of luck factor involved because you need to be at the right place at the right time. There are a lot of instances where people get placed at certain companies and there are better opportunities that come later on, and which kind of like bugs people down. So I think that's a very important thing that people also need to consider. So we don't have any control over that. There's no point like repenting on it once you're very clear that you've got the opportunity that you want.
Yeah, I myself have, I know friends who, came across a number of situations where they got really unlucky in that there are multiple interview panels and, people landed
Yeah.
specifically in an interview panel that focuses, or an interview panel that's in a bad mood or an interview panel that focuses on something that
Yeah.
the candidate really does not know, while all the other interview panels are fine, right? So that also happens a lot. So yeah, I do think luck definitely, plays a role, but just like, just like you can't do anything, I would say just, do your best, and I think luck should favor you in most cases,
Yeah.
right? So I think moving on to the last part of this, we are gonna talk about the positives and negatives of campus placements, right? So let's start with the positives. What do you think are the positives of campus placements?
Yeah, so
Saadi,
I
what
think
do
the
you
first thing with respect to campus placements is that there is some kind of job security. At least for like the premier engineering colleges or the top colleges, I would say that you're definitely given a job like whatever happens, right? So I think
Yeah.
that's a very important thing. Like as humans, like if you look at the next like 30, 40 years, I would say one of the biggest drivers is for us is going to be like job security, and only after we have job security we think about like all of the other factors, like, right? So I think that's very important. And for on-campus placements, I think that's the kind of environment that's there. And I think the second thing is that you always have your training and placement or your placement committee who you can always take their help. They are responsible for your placement, and so it's an external person, so they make sure that you kind of like get placed, you have the right set of skill sets, and if you don't, they'll kind of like train you also. So there's someone to always ask questions to and get some kind of guidance.
Okay, yeah. Adding to those points, right? So, couple more advantages or positives of on-campus placement is there's a limited pool of applicants. Like, it's only from that particular institute, and there's also when a company visits your campus, it means that they actually have vacancies in their company and they're looking to hire people, right? So in that way, those two add up to give you a much better chance of getting landing a job compared to going off campus. So that is one. And then the second thing is uniformity, as in the training and placement department kind of conducts this entire placement in that campus. So they have uniform dress codes, uniform resume templates, and the schedule is made according to the students' convenience and everything. So in that way, it makes it a level playing field, and people have to, and it gives everyone an equal opportunity to get a job. So those are two other advantages that I can think of. Vijay, do you have anything else in mind?
No, I think practically the same points, but I think the most important factor over there is that it's a level playing field and you're competing with a lot lesser number of people, right?
Yeah.
So when you're competing with a lot fewer people, it's much better. Your odds of getting placed are a lot better in most cases when it comes to on-campus placements. But I think so definitely a lot of positives, right, when you are trying to get a job on campus. But I'm sure that there are negatives as well. So do you think, so I think we have applied to our share of on-campus as well as off-campus jobs. So what are the negatives that you guys think are there for on-campus
Yeah.
placements?
So I kind of feel that the positives and negatives are like kind of the same. The fact that there is always someone to like rely on to make sure that you kind of get your job. It's kind of like a bad example, because if you think about the next like 40, 50 years of your career, right? Is it 50? I don't think it's 50, but yeah, 30, 40 years of your, 50 is a bit too much. Yeah, I'm not going to work at that point. So yeah, 20 to 40 years, whatever. 20 to 40 years of your career, if you're like switching jobs, would there always be a person responsible for making sure that you get the other job? In most cases, it's not going to be so. So there is a lot of work that you kind of need to put in, like building your network and trying to like sell yourself. That's the very important thing which you don't really learn when you're going through on-campus placements. So on-campus placements is just about getting your first job, but after that you're let loose and you have to take care of everything like completely on your own. And no one really knows how to do that. No one really knows how to use LinkedIn properly. No one knows how to just go to a networking event and have conversations with people. And I think that's where the problem lies in India itself. A lot of people, a lot of college students are dependent on like placements, and they find it difficult to navigate their career in the future years. So I think Kunal Shah puts it like beautifully. He compares this with the relationship and love marriage culture in India, right? The fact that is like very, very low is primarily that the result of that particular thing is that we don't really know how to sell ourselves. When you're going and proposing to another person, you legit have to like sell yourself, right? There are so many different things that you probably have to consider. And if you contrast this with like applying to companies, it's the same thing. Like the next 30-40 years, you kind of have to do the same thing, and people don't really have those skills, and that's where the problem really starts. You have all of this like midlife crisis and everything. So I think that's one of the biggest demerits of on-campus placements. Not like dissing on-campus placements in any ways. There are so many good things that it does, job security and everything, but thinking about the long term, this is the kind of impact that it has.
Yeah, I think as Sadi said, learning and exposure that you get through off-campus placements is much, much higher. Like you stand on your own and then you navigate through everything on your own, right? Without any kind of support from anyone. And it's you who has to get through everything. And if you do, I think, that is one reason why I remember when Sadi and Vijay both got placed off campus, right? Like the feeling of achievement was much, much, much higher for them. And then even I felt it was a very, very, very big thing to do compared to getting a job on campus. And that is because they navigated everything on their own and they achieved it. And that gives you high risk, high reward kind of situation. So...
That's true. Yeah, people need to understand that high risk, high reward thing, because that's very high risk if you're also going off campus, because you're competing with like so many folks outside, and whereas for on campus it's just like within the college, right? So you need to be in a position to take that particular decision, like analyze yourself and everything, and then take a call on that.
Yeah, so definitely a long-term impact there with respect to on campus. That's definitely a long-term negative, but there is one more short-term negative, which is that just by sheer number of opportunities, right? So there is a limit to the number of companies that will come to your campus, no matter what college you're in. And there are obviously more companies outside. So definitely, are there more number of jobs that you can apply to outside? Yes. And is there more diversity of profiles? Yes. Especially if you're interested in something very, very unique. Let's say you're interested in, filmmaking or graphic design, things like that, right? Or something that's completely unrelated. You have to sort of rely on off-campus. Like on-campus does not become an option anymore.
Yeah.
So that's definitely another negative.
Even for like both me and Vijay, like we really wanted to get into like management consulting, and on campus we really did not have all of those opportunities. Yeah. But we were very clear we wanted to get into that particular industry, so we went like off campus. So you need to understand there are certain profiles where you generally want to get like or work there, which you will not get on campus. So you can't be dependent on them. You need to basically build your profile, start networking, start reaching out to a lot of folks, build relationships with all of these people, prepare for the interview process, and compete with all of those folks applying all over the country and kind of get that role if you genuinely want to get into that particular industry. So yeah, that's the way it is.
Yeah, so I think we have definitely, so this has been a great conversation. I think we've really covered every aspect of, getting placed right from starting of college to actually landing a role. I think this has been a great conversation, and I think we definitely should do a video off campus as well, since that's needed, right? Because on campus and off campus there are definitely a lot of positives and a lot of negatives, so it's important to consider both, I would say, for any college student. So I would like to let the audience know, stay tuned for our next video on off campus placements, and yeah, that's it guys, bye bye.